I recently binge watched a couple seasons of Reacher, and it seemed absolutely necessary to turn him into a playable character in Dungeons and Dragons. Before we dive in, I gotta call out that we're gonna be doing the show version of Reacher because that's a little more accurate to the books, and not the movie Tom Cruise version, mostly because of the size disparity. And before we dive in, feel free to hit subscribe if that's your thing and you like D&D content. It's free, it really helps the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Not to mention, people that subscribe get more nat 20s. Now, without any more waiting, let's go ahead and dive into the race for Reacher. Now, I mentioned we're going to be going with the large Reacher and not the more Tom Cruise sized Reacher, so we're going to be going with a Goliath. It's constantly called out how big he is, and a Goliath really exemplifies that. They have a feature called Little Giant, so they get proficiency with the athletic skill, and when it comes to pushing, pulling, carrying stuff, they count as one size larger, just because they're so darn beefy. The other notable feature from being a Goliath for this build is called Stone's Endurance. Just because you've hardened your body so much, you can actually fight through the pain a little better. So if you take damage, you can use your reaction to roll a d12. Add your Constitution modifier to that, and you can reduce whatever damage you take by that total amount. You can only use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, but it's still super helpful. Then when it comes to a background, it's kind of a no-brainer. We're going to go with Soldier. This gives us proficiency with the Intimidation skill, and it would give us the Athletic skill as well, but since we already got that from our racial background, we get to choose whatever we want. Because Reacher excels at both physical and mental abilities, we're going to have to factor that in when we choose skill. There's not quite as many physical skills that relate to Reacher, at least from the skill list. We're going to be able to use our actual ability scores for that. So when we choose our ability scores, we're going to heavily focus on the physical stuff. And then we're going to make up for the slightly lacking mental ability with proficiency in the mental skills. And because Reacher is pretty good at recalling relevant information, I'm going to go ahead and give him proficiency in the history skill. Then when it comes to our ability scores, while we are going to focus on physical stuff, we still need to be fairly well-rounded. So we're going to have a point spread that looks like this, and then because we chose Goliath as our race, we get to choose 2 scores to increase 1 by 1 point and 1 by 2 points. So we're going to boost up our strength by 2 points and our dexterity by 1 point. That leaves us with a couple odd mental stats, but we'll deal with those a little later. Then when it comes to a class, we're going to be doing a multi-class, just giving you a heads up. You can multi-class at any given point during this build, it's just whatever feels right. But for the sake of editing, I'm going to go ahead and just do all of one chunk and then worry about the multi-class towards the end. Either way, I would recommend starting off as a fighter. This will give you a decent amount of health to start off with, which is a little more important when it comes to multi-classing, and fighter seems like a very good fit for the trained nature of Reacher as a character. This gives us proficiency with all armor, all weapons, and we get to choose 2 skills. So we're going to take 2 wisdom-based skills with insight and perception. Insight just because you're pretty good at reading the people you're talking to, and perception just to be aware of your surroundings. Then at first level of fighter, we also get to choose a fighting style. And Reacher is pretty good at hand-to-hand combat, even if he's just using his bare fists. So we're going to take the fighting style, unarmed fighting. This fighting style makes it so if you don't have any weapons in your hand, you can deal a d8 of damage plus your strength modifier just with a unarmed strike. And even if you have a weapon in one hand, you can still attack with the other hand with a d6 of damage instead. Not to mention, if you're grappling a creature, you can deal an extra d4 of damage at the start of your turn. Also at first level of fighter, you get the feature Second Wind. So if you need to fight through the pain a bit, you can use your bonus action to regain some hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. But you can only use this feature once per short or long rest. At second level of fighter, you get Action Surge, so you can actually take 2 actions in a single turn once per short or long rest. And then at third level of fighter, you get to choose your subclass, otherwise known as a martial archetype. And with how tactical Reacher manages to be, I think the best fit is going to be a Battle Master. Becoming a Battle Master allows you to learn special maneuvers when you're fighting. You can only use 1 maneuver per attack, but you can spend superiority dice on them. You only have 4 superiority dice to use right now, but you get more superiority dice as you level up in Battle Master. You regain the uses of them when you finish a short or long rest, and currently the size of those dice are d8s. We get to choose 3 maneuvers to learn right away, but we get more as we level up. The first one I would definitely grab, especially for Reacher, is Disarming Attack. So when you hit a creature, you can force it to make a strength save, and if it fails, it drops whatever weapon it's holding. And this is especially good if you happen to be using the unarmed fighting style, because you have free hands and it is a free action to be able to pick up a weapon. So you attack them, they drop their weapon, and you immediately pick it up, meaning it's your weapon now. Then another maneuver I would grab is parry, allowing you to reduce some damage you would take by expending a superiority die, but you already get this from being a Goliath. However, the amount of times you can use it as a Goliath is fairly limited, so having a few more uses with parry is definitely helpful to have, because we don't have a ton of constitution to boost up our health. So having that extra damage mitigation in the first place is very, very helpful. Then the last one I would grab right off the bat is Riposte, or Riposte, or Riposte if it's French, I don't know, however you pronounce it. So if a creature tries to make a melee attack against you and they miss, you then get a free attack against them just by using your reaction, and you get to add your superiority die to the damage. Then at 4th level of fighter you get an ability score, so we're just going to boost up our strength by 2 points. Then at 5th level of fighter you get the ever important extra attack, so now you can attack twice per action. Don't forget about action surge, so you can do it 4 times if you really want to. Then at 6th level of fighter you get another ability score, so we're going to max out our strength right away. And then at 7th level of fighter you get another feature from Battlemaster called Know Your Enemy. So now you can size up your opponent a little more accurately, which seems very fitting for Reacher. So now you can kind of compare them to your own fighting ability and know what you're really getting into. Understanding any of their physical ability scores when compared to your own, or comparing their armor class or hit points to yourself. And if you want to get really into the nitty gritty, you can compare their total amount of levels or their amount of fighter levels specifically. Unfortunately, you can only compare them to yourself, so if you have a lot of maxed out stats, it doesn't help quite as much, because you get to just find out if they have more or less or equal to the amount that you have. But also at 7th level, you get 1 more superiority dice to use once per short or long rest, and you get to choose 2 more maneuvers. So to make sure to utilize that grappling ability that you get from your unarmed fighting style, let's go ahead and take Grappling Strike. So you can try and grapple someone as a bonus action right after you hit them with an attack. The other one I would go with is Commanding Presence. You are a big, intimidating dude, and you have a bit of a reputation. And Commanding Presence makes it so whenever you make a charisma check relating to persuasion, performance, or especially intimidation, you can roll your superiority die and add it to the overall roll. Then at 8th level of fighter, you get another ability score improvement. So I'd go ahead and boost up our dexterity, because you do plenty of ranged attacks, whether you're using firearms or in the more fantasy-based world, something like crossbows. And Alan Richardson's also going to be coming out with a new movie in the near future where he uses an actual bow, so I guess that fits too, because all of that is going to rely on dexterity. Then at 9th level of fighter, you get the feature Indomitable. So if you fail on a saving throw, you can re-roll it once per long rest. Then at 10th level of fighter, and more specifically, the Battlemaster, you get Improved Combat Superiority. So your superiority die upgrade from a D8 to a D10, and you get to learn 2 more maneuvers. So I would definitely take Trip Attack, because it's very helpful for anybody in melee combat. If somebody happens to get knocked prone, any future attack while they are prone is going to be at advantage. Not to mention, using this maneuver allows you to boost up the damage of that attack in the first place anyways. Then the last maneuver I would go with at this level is Brace, because this makes it so you kind of brace for impact, and the second somebody moves into your reach, you can then expend a superiority die and use your reaction to get another attack against them, which they probably weren't expecting. And you get to add that superiority die to the damage, meaning that there's now 2 ways to use an attack as a reaction. You still also have your attacks as your action as well. And then at 11th level of fighter, you get 1 more extra attack, so now you can attack 3 times as your action. Then we're only going to take 1 more level in fighter, because this gives us another ability score improvement, and we're going to go ahead and boost up our dexterity by 2 more points. Now it's time for that multi-class, and we're really going to be using our dexterity, because now we get to multi-class into Rogue. Multi-classing into Rogue gives us 1 more skill to learn, and I would definitely grab Investigation, because Reacher is pretty darn good at that. Then the first feature you get with your first level in Rogue is Expertise. So you can double your proficiency bonus in 2 skills that you happen to be proficient in. So we're going to double that proficiency bonus with Insight and Investigation. The other feature you get at your first level of Rogue is Sneak Attack. So now if you have advantage on an attack, or there happens to be an enemy of your enemy within 5 feet of them, and you attack with a finesse weapon, you can actually deal extra damage. The extra damage is only 1d6 now, but that sneak attack damage goes up as you level up in Rogue. Then finally, the last feature you get from your first level in Rogue is Thieves' Camp, which is a special way that rogues are able to communicate. where it seems like a normal conversation, but you kind of pick up on subtle differences, then you can read what's really going on, which actually does happen pretty often in the Reacher TV show. Then at second level of Rogue, you get Cunning Action. So now you can use your bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide. Then at third level of Rogue, that sneak attack damage upgrades from 1d6 to 2d6, and you get to choose a roguish archetype, which is basically a subclass. And I think the one that's going to fit the best for Reacher is Inquisitive Rogue. The first feature you get from Inquisitive Rogue is Ear for Deceit. You're really good at picking out people's lies, which is very accurate to the show. So now whenever you roll an insight check to determine if somebody is lying, you can now treat any roll on the dice of a 7 or lower as an 8 by default, meaning you can't crit fail, you can't fail it in any way, especially with the expertise, because it's very rare that you're going to have to pass anything higher than what you would get with this overall combination of your wisdom, your proficiency bonus doubled, and whatever you would roll with an 8 or higher. Then another feature you get from this subclass is Eye for Detail. Again, feeling very accurate to Reacher. This allows you to use a bonus action to make a perception check or an investigation check, at least when it comes to spotting hidden creatures or looking for clues. Then the last and most important feature of this subclass at third level is Insightful Fighting. So as a bonus action, you can make an insight check countered by your enemy's deception check. And if you happen to succeed on that check, now you don't have to worry about having advantage or having an enemy of your enemy within 5 feet of them. You can still use your sneak attack ability, but the requirement of having a finesse weapon still applies. This benefit lasts for 1 minute or until you use this feature again against somebody else. But having consistent and reliable use of your sneak attack damage while being alone in combat feels very spot on for the character and very helpful overall. Then at fourth level of Rogue, you get another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and finally max out that dexterity. Then at fifth level of Rogue, your sneak attack damage upgrades from 2d6 to 3d6, and you get one more way to mitigate damage against yourself with the feature Uncanny Dodge. So now you don't even have to expend resources anymore if you don't want to reduce any damage against yourself. If a creature makes an attack against you and it hits, you can use Uncanny Dodge as your reaction, and any of the damage you would take is now cut in half. Then at 6th level of Rogue, you get Expertise and 2 more skills. So I'm going to go ahead and boost up our Intimidation and our Perception, because those are very useful for Reacher, and they don't get boosted up quite as much thanks to our ability scores, so having Expertise is even more helpful than more points in those abilities would ever be. Then at 7th level of Rogue, your sneak attack damage upgrades to 4d6, and you get another way to mitigate damage with the feature Evasion. So if you have to make a dexterity saving throw to reduce any damage against yourself, you automatically take half damage, and if you succeed on that saving throw, you take 0 damage. So now if there's a classic action movie explosion behind you, you can walk away without flinching, just looking like a badass. And then finally at 8th level of Rogue and 20th level overall, you get your last ability score improvement. And I'm sure those odd ability scores were driving a few people nuts. So let's go ahead and put 1 point into our intelligence and wisdom, finally rounding them out. And then for some quick tips on how to roleplay this with a few fun little bits. Maybe you don't even want the other players at your table to know that you're roleplaying as Reacher, but you want to give a few hints for people that are fans of the show or the books or whatever. 1, come up with a cool last name, or a really ridiculously long one. And make sure that everybody should be calling you by that last name and not your first name ever. 2nd, never pick up anything that you don't want to carry on yourself. You don't walk around with a bag, you don't walk around with anything, you're just as minimalist as you can possibly be. And then the last fun little bit to play around with is that in D&D, most armor and weapons don't really degrade, so you can basically exchange them whenever you want. So anytime you get to a new town, just go ahead and go in and say, you know, my armor's pretty covered in stuff from fighting. Let me go ahead and trade you my armor for some other armor of the exact same quality. Just like how Reacher is constantly going into thrift shops and getting new sets of clothes because he doesn't ever pack any clothes, and he is always getting them covered in blood and gore. This build was actually recommended over on my Discord a while back by one of my patrons, but if you have any builds that you want to see in the near future, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. That's where I get most of the ideas for most of my builds. And if you want access to the character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, feel free to check out my Patreon linked in the description down below, where absolutely amazing supporters like these people are there just reaping the benefits of getting extra character sheets and whatever else I wind up posting over there. Not to mention I have some especially awesome patrons: Natron209, Johnny Dyer, Kevin Shirley, Zephyros, That Funny Man 57, Joshua Maynard, CGC 2014, Afstorm, Elisa Martinez, Panda Milkshake, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Carcat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Set 13, Viral Nervarg, Daniel Galvin, and the Dino 21. Then there's the Dungeon Master level patrons I play D&D with: Shane Gilroy, Command ZX, Cybersiety, Demiurge, Salvador, Devin Happy, and Kilo Kilo. Then going above and beyond anything I ever expected is my God tier level patron, GameSteak. So a very special thank you to him. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as the unreasonably large adventurer just wandering the earth like Jack Reacher in Dungeons & Dragons.